sinister than the definite form of narrative. You are charged with
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 26 of the Spotlight Podcast, Success Stories for Veterans, where it is our job to break down and analyze titans from both the military and civilian communities to discover their tactics, their mindset, and their systems so that you can apply them to your life and ultimately to your transition. Those titans range from New York Times bestselling authors to former heads of state to other divergent thinkers who are out there dominating their field by challenging conventional wisdom. And today we're interviewing Garret Harrell. Now, Garrett's transition began when he left the Marine Raiders after over 20 years in the Corps. Now, Garrett is a bit of a transition unicorn because he was able to amass a ton of business acumen in a very short period of time. And now Garrett has been able to leverage that acumen to begin working for himself. So how does he do it? Listen and find out. Garrett, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Awesome. Thanks, Carson. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So for Garrett, for people who might not be familiar with you and what you do, run us through what you're working on right now.
Yeah, perfect. So I have, I hate to say it's not a startup by any means or a small business, but I am self-employed. I started a company. It's called Southern Cross Leadership Solutions. The Southern Cross, a reference to a previous life of mine as a Marine Raider. But basically the concept is, we go into organizations and we're not going to change the world by any means. But what we can do is we can help them develop and sustain their teams into high-performing teams. And it's really creating the individual leader across, everybody says, a high-performing team is a team and you really don't even know who the leader is, right? Because everybody's stepping up at some point in time. And we really focus individually first, and then we build behaviors and we change mindset and try to change behaviors as we come to a team, and ultimately understanding what effective teams look like, but really what the difference between effective and high performing is. So that's kind of where I'm at now. It's basically a professional training company, and it's very nascent. It's only a couple of months old. So really what I'm doing is I'm learning how to market, I'm learning how to sales, and I'm learning how to be everything in a company. So yeah, it's a good time though. It's challenging, and that's, I'm committed to it. I like I obviously believe in it, and it's a new challenge that I'm taking head on.
So when you were getting out, and you said everything's pretty nascent, still pretty new to the market. When you're getting out, talk to me about that decision-making process to ultimately leave the military and to where you are now.
Yeah, I will. So I kind of made it, it's weird because I kind of had in the back of my mind that I knew when I was going to retire. What I didn't really understand was when I was going to pull the trigger on it. And understanding what your end date is, but really understanding when you're going to pull the trigger. They were two, they were different things. And I was thinking about the end date, not necessarily when I was going to pull the trigger, which is vitally important, because when you pull the trigger to when that end date is your transition for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So when I did, my first glimpse into what the next chapter was going to hold was I had come across, I believe it was via LinkedIn. One thing I did do correctly was I attended my service specific as a Marine. I attended the retirement seminar, I believe is what they call it, which coincidentally for people non-retiring, it's called Transition Readiness Seminar, because the acronym's the same, right? We got to keep it easy for the Marines. But yeah, I did TRS, and I bought. I was like, okay, I got to do LinkedIn, and so when I set out to do something, they were talking about, you guys got to start doing something. By the time I came back the next day, I had a LinkedIn page. I think I actually was connecting with people at the rapid rate that I got booted off the platform a couple of times. Overkill. But I came across an organization called Elite Meet, and what they are is they are a 501c3 and they specialize in introducing hiring partners, high caliber hiring partners to veterans of the special operations community, and to include specially selected pilots, so fighter pilots, pilots with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, etc. And I kind of got pigeonholed from Elite Meet, and I am still, so people are tracking, I am still very involved in Elite Meet, and I believe in the organization, obviously, but I did get pigeonholed. It was very focused on the tech industry and the finance industry, and I saw a lot of success stories coming out of Elite Meet that really revolved around the finance sector, whether that was venture capital, investment banking, private equity, etc. And I talked to a few guys, and obviously when you're transitioning, it's like, everything sounds interesting, but nothing sounds interesting. And you realize that you're qualified for everything and nothing all at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So I really was hung up on this whole finance thing because honestly, I had no, I had a bachelor's degree in criminology, a minor in chemistry. I got a master's degree in strategic leadership, which is essentially, it's a non-technical business degree. I had gotten, an executive cert, but what I didn't have was business acumen. And I was like, oh, well, this probably will be interesting, right? I mean, it's a new thing, right? So I really fell into that trap kind of. So I kind of I established my transition based on this concept for the most part. This was something that I was interested in because it was the only thing I knew at that point in time. So I did the things that I thought that would help me get to yes in that area. To include, I applied for the Tuck Next Step program at Dartmouth, which is a transition to business program for military and athletes. And I worked through the Special Operations Care Coalition to get a fellowship with a local bank, that not a brick and mortar bank like we assume, but the bank is for starters, it's creates financial technology, and has a couple of platforms, and it's where the platform that what is now a publicly traded company in Encino, it's where that company was built from, but the bank is called Live Oak Bank, and they are a fantastic company that basically has streamlined the lending process from in the perspective of small business administration loans for people that are trying to build small business. So I'm totally behind it, right? I think small business is the backbone of the United States of America's economy. And it was financial technology, and it's headquartered right down the street, right? Like, you just can't get any better than this. So I had all of this laid out. This was the path that I was on. I was studying financial accounting. I mean, I was doing it all, right? And COVID hit. And 2 months into a 3-month program with Dartmouth, I was basically finished with the non-resident portion of that. COVID had struck, and they called off the resident portion. It has since been deferred, and I fully intend to attend the program in April of this coming year. Fingers crossed. And same thing with my internship. My internship became what was going to be an awakening experience for me. I had been in the military for 21 total years, and I was coming on the backside of 18 years as a U.S. Marine. And I had started out in the infantry, and did the last 14 as a Marine Raider in Marine Corps Special Operations Command. And I was really looking forward to going into Live Oak because it was a new environment, right? I mean, the average age of the person there was probably very comparable to the candidates that we have come in, and the guys that hit the ground running at the lower team level. But it's such a diverse population of people, much unlike the Marine Corps is diverse in a sense that people are from all over the place, but we all bleed the same red, white, and blue, scarlet, and gold, right? Like the indoctrination has happened. and we are Marines. And I was really excited to go into a place where, man, I'm definitely going to have to watch what I say, right? And this is going to be a new experience. And that was completely taken away from me. Not completely. I did do somewhat of a virtual thing, and it was a learning experience as well. But, a little bit of demotivation kicked in. I didn't feel like I was getting everything I was getting. And then I had some valuable conversations with people. And, they pulled a lot of things that as coaches and mentors are supposed to do. They pulled some things out of me that really changed my mind of why I was doing what I was doing. And man, like when I figured out what I was really excited about, it was a complete 180-degree turn. So
talk to me about those conversations, because you said you got mentors. They're interacting with you. What did those conversations look like, and what was the driving impetus behind your change of mind?
So yes. So I will tell you that a lot of those conversations were hard, and as valuable as they were invaluable to an extent. And I just say that there are a lot of great organizations out there doing things, and I'll throw things out like American Corporate Partners and Veterati, things that cater to the veteran crowd to help. But it is, these are, seeking coaches and mentors is a relationship, right? And it is hard to build relationships around things like that. American Corporate Partners is supposed to be more of more focused around a relationship, where Veterati, for the most part, are one-offs with people in industry, so you can talk to them. Some were rewarding, most were not. I'll be honest. Not that the people weren't talented and had things to offer, just not as inspiring as I had hoped for.
Yeah.
American Corporate Partners had a great guy that I was paired with, but I honestly think I've said this before, I might write a book, right? I am not a unicorn by any means, but I was not what they were expecting, right? Here's a 40-plus-year-old dude who is a master sergeant in the Marine Corps. He's coming from 14 years as a special operations guy. He's got a master's degree and then some. And, and I've got more service than the people that I'm talking to, higher education than the people I'm talking to, although I do understand the value that they are bringing, right? But I think sometimes, I struggled with a little bit, and that guy understood that too. And he turned me over to someone, and that is when the kind of the light switch flipped. I started having really good conversations with that guy, and he was pulling the things out that I really needed to be pulled out. And he got me really thinking about what a day in the life of Garrett as an employee at this organization or this company, or what that looked like. And honestly, it was nothing that I could get excited about, and it was nothing that I wanted to do, knowing where I was in life based on what I had done. And what I mean by that is, life isn't going to get any cooler probably. But the thing is the things that I truly missed out on that I wish I could go back, which I have a young son and a young daughter. Here I'm about to potentially do the same thing for something that maybe is less than meaningful than previous stuff, right? So that's when I really started thinking, and it was kind of at the same time, I had seen a post on LinkedIn by a gentleman that I had actually attended a seminar with. He was an instructor for a leadership course in a transition fellowship called the Honor Foundation, which was my first true step into transition and understanding what was ahead, right? And I saw on LinkedIn where they were looking for people to partner with in order to help them run their training and stuff. And I believed in the product. It really resonated with me when we sat in. It was one of the very initial courses that we get, and it resonated. It really did. So I contacted him, and at the time I'm still thinking, yes, I'm going to go to this, this bank. And, And lo and behold, some of the positions that I was looking at with the bank ultimately went away because of COVID. I ended up touching base with these individuals, and and I was like, I told my mentor that I had connected with, the newest one. I was telling him this, and he was like, man, after all the time that we've spoken, this is the first time that I have ever heard you get like excited about anything. Mm-hmm. And that really meant something to me. And so I was like, you're right. And then when I really did some self-reflection, I did some really awesome things in 14 years as a Marine Raider. But the highlights that I really looked back on with the most fondness were my 3.5 years as an instructor at our training center, and then my last 2 years where I was in charge of the only regimental controlled exercise that the Marine Raider Regiment across all 3 battalions ran, and I was responsible for it. And it was, when I looked at it, what's the common denominator? The common denominator is the development of the next guy that's going to take my place ultimately. Because I've just always enjoyed doing that, helping people, sort of explore and reflect the things that they're doing to be better than they were the day before. So
let's talk then, because that's a good segue into the next component, because there's something that I had read on your LinkedIn profile, and you talk about the importance of being individually sharp and pointy. So yeah. What is that all about, and how does that apply to this process?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a perfect segue. So the training that I do in my company, Southern Cross Leadership Solutions, and the intellectual property that the gentleman had in his training, it is based on Gallup research, right? So Gallup, the organization that everyone knows for mostly polling, but they are also responsible for the Strengths Finder, also now known as the Clifton Strengths Assessment, which is a talent-based personality assessment, right? And when I say individually sharp and pointy, so we have all, I think, I was talking to someone from South Africa recently, and he even mentioned this, but at some point in our life, we have all grown up with this sort of mindset that we have to be well-rounded. We have to be, you have to be good at everything, right? Well, Gallup research will tell you that is absolutely false, right? Like, we don't need to be well-rounded. What we need to be is we need to really explore what our talents are. And, the algorithm is talent times investment equals strengths. And that's what your strengths are. And if we focus on our strengths, and there's 34 talent themes, and there's 4 domains when it comes to Gallup's research. But if you focus on what you as a person are just inherently good at, right? If you ask me what my top 10 talents are, they are all built on in an execution or strategic thinking domain. I have one relationship building talent in my top 10. Okay. And it's strategic thinking, execution, relationship building, and influence are the 4 domains. Doesn't mean that I can't build relationships, because I do. And I actually am really good at it. It's just not as a person, it's not what my strongest things are. So when you understand that about yourself, and if I'm looking at you and all of a sudden you're knocking relationship building and influence out of the water, then we are nesting these complementary talents together, right? And that's when we become well-rounded. But as an individual, I need to focus on what I'm talented at. Doesn't mean that I do not need to be competent in other areas, because I do need to develop competencies in areas where I'm weak. But instead of focusing on areas where I'm weak, let me focus on the areas that I'm just naturally good at, and the things that I enjoy doing. And the impetus of the research is actually based on Donald Clifton had read so many psychological assessments, and every single one, and this assessment was created in 1999, but every single one focused on what is wrong with the individual and how do we make that better.
Right.
And he was like, why are we focusing on what's wrong? Mm-hmm. Let's figure out what we do well what we like to do, and let's focus on that and build competencies in the areas where we're weak. So that's what I mean by individually sharp and pointy. It's you're focusing on your individual talents, but when you nest those with complementary talents, that's when you become well-rounded. And you want a well-rounded team. You want to be able to understand what the value add that everybody is bringing to the table.
Gotcha. So when you were going through the process of deciding, what you're good at and what you enjoy and where those intersections are, like, what did you actually do? Was it sitting down with pen and paper? Was it having conversations with friends? What did that look like?
So outside of having the mentorship conversations, honestly, it was really a conversation with myself and my wife. I spoke to myself first, and I kind of did, and yes, and I'm a checklist guy, right?
Yeah,
so I'm
too.
thinking in terms. I'm a checklist guy, and I'm writing a bunch of stuff down, and I'm like, okay, like if I'm going to do this, this is what this is going to look like. But this is not just me. I've got a wife. I've got 2 children. If I'm going to do something, this is obviously something that we're going to do together. So, and I'll be honest, I I am usually very measured when it comes to things, but I think we talked about Rob Renz earlier. I've had conversations offline with him, but I told him if I did anything, I was very excited when I finally was like, oh, this is the hardest thing that I've been trying to figure out. What the next chapter looked like for me was daunting. It was just nerve-wracking. So when I finally thought that this was it and I was excited, man, that excitement ran loose. So I will say that for every 3 steps forward that I took, at some point in time, I was taking 1.5, 2 steps back because I was jumping the gun on things. I was kind of putting the cart before the horse in instances. And, but I checklist things, and then I got really excited. And then next thing you know, I had a business registered. Like I was, my this will make sense, but my number 1 talent is learner, which is an execution based, but learner. But I will tell you that I got on the internet, and if it had anything to do with the establishment of a company, to include specifically an LLC, I was reading it. I was digesting all of the information. I was going through the process. I was reviewing sources that support these things. Ultimately, I did it all on my own. With just a lot of research. But yeah, I was really just thinking in terms of myself. I was doing a lot of just self-research, and then I had conversations with my wife. And really those conversations were just, hey, this is what I want to do. And, after 18 years in the Marine Corps, she was happy with anything that wasn't really going to take me away or take me down the road an hour, but still be gone 60, 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
So
So
I hope that was an answer to the question.
That does, because that's very important, and specifically the research. But I'd like to stay on, if we could, for just a second, the dynamic between you and your wife, because this is one thing that I see a lot of ambitious veterans running into is, they're concerned on one side that maybe their eyes are too big for their stomach, versus on the other side, they don't want to sell themselves short. And spouses are kind of caught in the wash, right? Because they want to be supportive on either side, but the conversations sometimes unfold poorly. And I see a lot of veterans struggling with their relationship, whether it's a marriage or long-term committed relationship, et cetera. How did you broach that subject with your wife so that you guys stayed on the same page as you're going through that discovery process?
So first and foremost, like I really framed the discussion as it was an us discussion, right? In fact, so much so that and this was something my wife had come up with several years ago when she was doing photography for people, but she was basically watermarking all of her photos with the name Harrell squared, right? With the actual square symbol. Mm-hmm. So when I even brought it to her, I was like, this is us. This is going to be you and I. And this is what we're doing. So Southern Cross Leadership Solutions is a doing business as name, but the actual LLC that I have is called Harrell Squared Consulting. And that was me basically telling her that, hey, this is an us against them, it's us against the world type thing. But honestly, she was very receptive because, I mean, we still have a lot of friends, right? And I've got a lot of guys that once they leave the community, they find a way to get their foot in the door to just another aspect of the community, right? Whether that's finding themselves overseas or finding themselves behind the gates at the compound again. And she just knew that, it was probably self-preservation in her mind as well. Like she doesn't necessarily, she would much rather deal with me when I'm happy and in a good mood. Mm-hmm. And I think she knew that just going behind the curtain, going behind the curtain, or going behind the compound or finding myself somewhere was just going to be taxing and ultimately just, take years off my life and just take, and that was really how I framed it as well. Like, this is something that we can do together, but this is something that I'm not going to lose years off my life. I'm not going to come home. Like, the last thing you want is a guy that leaves, goes into work, comes home and just explodes with the idiocy that he probably dealt with throughout the day, right? And the frustration of not having growth. And that was another thing that really turned me off to a lot of those opportunities. They're one-offs, right? And it's like you get to a point where you can only do so much so long, but there didn't really seem like a lot of growth built into any of them. And obviously growth is important to me. It was, which is one of the reasons I also decided to find my time out of the Marine Corps. Was I just knew that growth was limited, and it was time to move on. But she was very, and I would say this, it's probably a different situation. I retired, right? Mm-hmm. I have a pension. I haven't gotten disability yet because I'm still dancing the dance with the VA, but I have a pension and there will be disability in the future. And I had opportunities. I still support MARSOC in iterations of helping training in areas where I was an instructor before. So I still have cash flow coming in. So it's, there are those things, but, I would say that, I can absolutely understand the fear behind some of those points, especially if you're coming out of the military after less than a full retirement, because you don't have that fallback, and it can be a very scary thing. And I am not the expert, and I would never call myself an expert in anything. But I'm not the expert to talk to people about they should go into entrepreneurship or they should take a job. They should do this. Like, honestly, that is a decision that someone has to make with a lot of reflection and a lot of talking to other people, in all honesty, and helping draw some of those conclusions out of them.
So talk to me about when you were going out and you did a considerable amount of research. You're talking about reading books, you're talking about scouring the internet, you're talking about talking to people. When you're going through those resources, particularly people, how are you determining what's a quality resource versus what is total bullshit?
That's a really good question. So I would say that, I obviously researched the hell out of people before I really went the method, the distance to spend time talking to them. And I had to make sure that there was a quality. So there was some type of common ground in there that we could actually, build relationships, because I think, a BS factor is, this goes probably across the board with things, but relationships they come first. And I would go to say too, like, the minute, like, someone referred, like, if anyone gave me the impression that they thought they were an expert in anything, I had no interest, right? Because it's just, I don't claim that, right? And I hate using some of the words that I use, even on my website or when I talk to people and I'm trying to talk to them about the training that I do, because I'm not that guy, right? There's so many people that are highly intelligent and highly capable, but really going to talk to those people, I wanted a commonality, and I wanted life in the field. And I'll tell you kind of how I did it, because like I said, I'm a checklist kind of guy, and I had a mentor, and as I was thinking this, he confirmed that was a good way to do it without me saying this is what I'm thinking. When he said, I would approach it this way, and it was exactly how I was looking at it. I was like, well, bam, that's the way we're going to do it. But I had taken a career leader assessment also through the Honor Foundation, right? And what that did is that basically takes, multiple industries, and based on your responses to the assessment, kind of racks and stacks them of where you are saying that you are going to be a good fit in the things that interest you. And I mean, obviously when you spend 8 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years in the military, everything is foreign to you anyways, right? So when it can be terrifying when, you see and honestly, my number one was marketing, right? And I'm like, what the hell? Right? I don't have a marketing degree. Yeah. I don't have a marketing degree. I don't have, but I wasn't going to discount it, because the assessment had teeth to it, right? And I was thinking in my head, all right, these 10 or 12 things, all of these industries, I'm just going to start calling. I'm just going to find people, and I'm going to talk to them, people that are in these industries. And I even I even wrote out questions. I want to know this, and I would go through. And that was where Veterati kind of came in, which was hit or miss. But you get on, because then you can do the research. But I really wanted people that had legitimacy in the industry, right? Like, you can't tell me that you just did 20 years in the military and you're 1 or 2 years in. Like, I wanted to speak to people that had been there and had probably moved around multiple times within the industry, within positions, so they could better inform me of what they were thinking when they went into the industry, why they went into the industry, what was the draw in the first place, and when they got there, what were the things that occurred that they had anticipated, and what were the things that were complete surprises, and if they could go back, what would they want to tell themselves, right? And I was just pulling questions like this, and I was, some I absolutely, I think in the top 12, some I marked out. For starters, I think law was in the top 5. And I was like, well, I don't know how this is possible, because I am not interested in any of this. And there's no way in hell that I would even entertain going to law school at this stage in my life.
Don't do it. I'm there. And I agree.
So I marked it off. So I was able to discount some of those, but sales, marketing, I actually have that assessment saved in my in a file on my desktop, so I could go back and look. But I did that, and I talked to all those people. I talked to people in finance, and then I broke it down, right, based on what I was interested, because that was up there. I broke it down into private equity, venture capital, investment banking. I learned a lot. I was already learning a lot through Elite Meet, which was another network that I could tap into for that stuff, because I had joined Elite Meet. And then within a month, I had started the Honor Foundation, and I was going through that process. So Elite Meet was an absolute fantastic resource to talk to guys that had all done the same thing, right? Guys that had come out of some type of elite military unit that were now finding themselves in areas, and they wanted to talk about it, and that was a great thing. It was really awesome talking to a lot of those guys, because obviously the commonality was there, and just because we were members of an organization together, we had a lot of there were already relationship building foundations there. So I did all that, and those were kind of things that how I sort of found myself where I had, and I'll even go to say that finance was probably down lower on the list, but probably the debt and breadth of conversations that I had with guys that I had a lot more in common with that could speak intelligently to those things were probably things that drew me that way as well.
Gotcha.
Only for me to ultimately find out that that wasn't where I wanted to be.
Yeah, it happens.
But it happens, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's going to happen. And I don't think there's anything, and I want to say that I thought, in a previous podcast of yours that I think it was Mike Sorelli had said, people shouldn't, they say, and you read the stats and they're like, well, 67% of veterans aren't within their, don't last 1 year in their first job. And it's okay. So what, man? Like, okay, I get it. Good. That means they realized they didn't want to do that shit and they moved on, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It's not a bad thing. So what was surprising for you beyond just you reprioritize things? What was surprising for you as you went through that process? Is anything that just stuck out?
I don't know if it was, I don't know if I was I think what was surprising was, I think entrepreneurship, was number 2 on that assessment. I think it was marketing and then entrepreneurship. And I remember having a conversation with the mentor. So first, 2 things. I remember having a conversation with a gentleman named Chris Lord, and we were talking about that career leader assessment. And he actually is a coach for the Honor Foundation. And I had missed that class. I was actually running a training program. So I had emailed him and said, man, I really want to talk to you. And man, this guy talked to me on the phone while he was in traffic out in Los Angeles for an hour and a half. And we did this thing. But he really was going to that. And he's like, it's number 2 on your list. It's number 2 on your list. And I just told him, I was like, I'm not ready. And I had this, it's not a humility thing, right? It's me though, because I am a measured person. Most of the time I'm extremely measured. I was like, who am I to leave the military and go out and call myself an entrepreneur or a small business owner when I lack that foundational acumen that people have working in a different industry, right? Whether that's consulting, whether that's finance, whatever, but business is business, right? And if it's in the private sector, JP Morgan runs the same way a supply chain company runs. Like they have, just because they focus in different industries doesn't mean that their functions aren't the same. And here I didn't have any of that foundational knowledge about any of those functions. So I was adamant that yes, maybe at some point in time, and I didn't know what entrepreneurship looked like at that point. I didn't know if that was me being innovative and designing something, or if that was me jumping on a great idea and franchising something. I had actually, a year before any of this was happening, I'd had a phone call with a gentleman that owns a leadership development company because I was interested in it. And this was sort of like, as these things, I'm starting to self-reflect, and I'm like, I was interested in this, and I'm telling this guy this, but what I wasn't interested in was all the royalties that came involved and the money that was coming there, right? Like at the end of the day, I need to remember I have a family and I need to take care of them. So when I told him this, he's like, okay, so, and it was one of the ones I marked off and say, I'm just now remembering this. But I had marked entrepreneurship off because I wasn't interested. And then the guy said, the different guy that I was talking to, a gentleman named Steve Adult, you can find all these guys on LinkedIn if you're interested in touching base with any of them. He's the one that had sort of like, he's the one that mentioned what does a day in the life of Garrett look like, driving to Wilmington and working 40 hours and then some. He said, man, don't sell yourself short by any means. He goes, plenty of people with less experience and less talent than you come out and they are able to package and sell what it is that you want to do and what you would be good at, and they're successful. And I was like, that's true. I was like, I never thought about it that way. And then I go back and I'm thinking about my previous conversation with the guy about all the money, and then my conversation with Chris Lord, and then I was like, which made me remember, oh yeah, this was something I told myself I was interested in almost a damn year ago. And I mean, there was just all these things. And it's, I will tell you, if there's one thing that just, I mean, is self-reflection. Like there are things that are happening in your timeline that you may not remember, you write off, but I can go back now and I can put some of these pieces, and some of these pieces I'm honestly putting together for the first time as we're sitting here talking about it. Right. But like, I can remember each one of these instances. Yeah. So yeah, that was, that was when Steve Adel told me that, he's like, when I was like, man, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it really does.
It
Does seem to be that simple as finding what you're good at, in the intersection of finding what you're good at and what you enjoy. So, but one thing I've been most impressed with is how quickly you got up to speed, specifically in the world of business acumen, right? So talk to me about getting up to speed. If I don't know an industry, how can I learn the lingo and the people, aside from what we've already talked about?
So that is where definitely, so obviously I'm a research guy. I started reading and listening to a ton of books, more books than podcasts. I really started the area that, as I was exploring this, when I became affiliated with the company that I'm affiliated with, but what I was wanting to take a step or two further, I invested myself in just studying that. So I became a student, and a lot of this stuff obviously was things that I experienced in real time and in life as a Marine Raider on Marine Special Operations teams, or just on a staff somewhere. And I became a student, and I read, and I started connecting with those individuals as well. It's amazing. Sometimes you think, hey, yeah, this individual wrote this book. Sometimes you just reach out and hope for the best. But I've connected with a few of the people whose research really backs the training that I bring through with my company as well. And mentors. That was probably, and I'll be honest, this is still an area where I'm struggling. I'm still trying to find my way in this realm, but I do have a few mentors. In fact, I talked to a guy yesterday, and I'm hoping that I didn't annoy him, because he is a wealth of information to tap into. But the problem is, and this is where you talk about, that bullshit meter from before, like everybody, like, oh my gosh, I get it. Here's Garrett. He's got a company that does leadership development, whatever. Like, the space is saturated. I understand that. There's so many people doing it. And I mean, it's so amazing when you start looking and you're like, some of these people are calling things different names because it can get a different market, right? Management consulting management consulting is not the same thing as leadership development, right? Management consulting is management consulting. But a lot of these things are so conflated, and they've just been smashed together, and everybody's in the space. And now I've got, 24-year-old college grads that have bought into said name program, right? They paid their dues. They got a trademark name, and now they're leadership development gurus with the backing of a company, and all they know is the 2 days of training that they went through. And it's just, so when I started, like, really, it's been hard. I will tell you, it's been hard. The people that I'm affiliated with are obviously, they're talented. So it's a man named John Vincent and his wife, Deb Fortin. They've written 2 books. They've got a patent on their model. And John was a command master chief in the Navy for 20 years. And when you really think about, and this is coming from a guy that was a Marine Raider, but when you really think about the idea of, like, what it takes to keep, a $2 billion vessel running, and realizing that 90% of the people that are making that thing work are 23 years old or less, it's amazing, right? So something's working. The U.S. Navy is doing something right. And he took a lot of those concepts that they used, and he wrote books, but they've been in the business for a long time. And not to mention, John was Gallup's, like, #1 executive consultant out after the military. So in another life, right? He was Gallup's #1 executive consultant, highest rated based on customers, right? but they know it, and they've been running a successful business. They've got fantastic clients. They've got long-term relationships. And, so finding people like them that are successful, and then, I'm doing my own research, but I'm also doing self-development for myself. And I'm reading, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which was sat on a shelf for years. And honestly, if I could go back and remember one thing about it now, it's just, there was a whole chapter on circle of influence versus circle of concern. And once I realized that, man, I'm here to be impactful. If that literally means that I'm impactful to the company down the street, that's really what matters, right? Like, my circle of influence doesn't have to be, I'm not calling Microsoft. I don't care. There are people that are going to do that, and they have big companies, and they're going to do well at it. It just doesn't, it's the people that are, and going back to, and it just really attracts me, but that small business, that small to mid-market enterprise, that is the backbone of the U.S., just wanting to make people better. So, but it's been a struggle, really trying to find mentorship, in those, and it's not that people aren't open, it's people are busy. People aren't as busy now, but it's really trying to sift through. That is where it gets difficult, sifting through who is someone that knows what they're talking about versus someone that just has labels on a LinkedIn page.
Yeah. So you mentioned the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That's obviously a great resource. What other resources did you come across that really meant something to you, or that were fundamental in shifting your perspective?
Yeah. So it's not necessarily a resource, but it's a book, and I've read it. I've read this thing 3 times, and it is not easy to read. But The Endurance by Alfred Lansing by far was, oh man, it's like the greatest story barely told. It's so many people don't even know about it, but it is an epic of human will, if there ever was one. These people were confronted with everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and then it happened over and over and over again. But it really showed me like what determination can do. So that just, when I start floundering at things, or when I'm thinking that, oh, life sucks, honestly, a lot of times I lean back to that, and plenty of, and it helps when plenty of leadership books have actually been written about Ernest Shackleton, who is what The Endurance is really about. And he was an explorer that went on an expedition that went greatly wrong, but didn't so much, because he was able to keep his entire crew alive over the course of 2 years. But that's a fantastic resource. That's just something that I always think back to. I do a lot of resources are just team building things. I was talking to someone recently, though. The interesting thing about leadership material is that, for the most part, it's not necessarily new. It's typically repackaged in some form or another. But I do listen to a lot of things. I do read a lot of books. I'm a fan of Patrick Lencioni, who has a bunch of different leadership plus management style books, and they're all told in the form of stories, which makes it easy for the Marine in me, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, resource wise, I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I read a lot, and really, it's just, I look around the room. I have several books from people associated with Gallup, just because I do believe in that. And it's interesting, and that's something that I fall back on as well. But I went through a ton of different personality tests. I've sat in front of operational psychologists numerous times just over the course of my career. And that was fantastic, because that told other people things about me, right? It never told me anything about myself, right? I did the Myers-Briggs, I did the DISC. It never told me anything about myself. It actually, the way we did it, it was more along the lines of the reason I did a disc assessment, and I did it multiple times in MARSOC, was so I understood what the people underneath me. So when I'm looking at letters, I can say, oh, this guy's that, this guy's that. I mean, great. Okay, great. What I never learned was really about myself. And I since I've become a Gallup successful strengths coach as well. And I really love exploring that type of stuff with people. So I do look at a lot of Gallup stuff as far as resources, just for learning about myself and being able to tell other people that are questioning things, resources for them. But yeah.
Gotcha.
I don't
So
know, man.
and I know we're running out of time. So before we get out of here, give me, if I had a magic wand and I could just implant a message in the mind of every ambitious veteran that's out there right now, from your perspective, what would that be? What do you wish that you had known?
So I really wish I had known what I wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
But I get it. I think everybody probably wants that. I will tell you that you have to do your due diligence, though. You have to do your due diligence, and you have to do the research. My dog's running around, sorry. You have to do the research. But if I could say, for a lot of guys that come out of the community that I came out of, then your next chapter is probably, you're not going to get to that stage in life again, right? You're not going to come out of a Marine Raider unit. And I'm not going to speak for SEALs or Green Berets or Rangers. I know a ton of them. And I would be willing to bet that they think the same thing, right? But from a Marine Raider perspective, you're not going to come out and just find that in your next thing. It doesn't mean what you do next can't be purposeful, though, right? And I think that's something that you really have to explore. There's plenty of, there's a lot of talk out there, and they'll say, people say, follow your passion. And then you turn around from as many articles that say, follow your passion, you find one that says, why following your passion is bad advice, right? I would say, but you can absolutely find something purposeful in what you do next. And I think it's really hard for guys that don't have specialties. I think if you're coming out of the military and you were a specialist versus a generalist, right? Like, so you were in logistics, or you were in intelligence, or things like that. Like, I think there's things that you can find that are good segues. I mean, threat intelligence in the business sector is a huge thing. I had a conversation with someone about it yesterday. And it's exciting, and it's real world, and you're in the private sector. But I think from an operations perspective, like what we know from a generalist mentality is it makes it more difficult to really know what it is that we want to do. So I would say you got to do your due diligence. You have to do your research. Talk to as many people as you can in areas, and don't discount areas. Like, like I said, I wish I would have explored entrepreneurship maybe a little bit more in that window up front. I wish I would have actually explored sales and marketing a little bit more, because honestly, as a business owner, that's what I find myself doing the most of. So, it's hard. Resources, I guess be deliberate in the resources you use. Well, don't get overwhelmed. I think I kind of got overwhelmed by resources, and what I mean by that is there were things that were offered to me, and I have said this before, and I'm starting to rethink what I have told people, but I have said, take advantage of everything. Well, that can be very confusing, right? There's a ton of resources out there. There's a lot of veteran service organizations and nonprofits that support veterans that are doing fantastic things, but there's a lot of confusion. They're hard to sift through. There's a lot of duplication of effort in similar ways, but there's a lot of gaps left, right? So there's still, and when things are held in front of you like a carrot on a stick, and certifications and things like that, like, I get it. Just don't get caught up in all of that. right? Don't think because someone's going to throw you're going to get this for free, that's going to be the be all end all. Like I tried that stuff, and honestly, I wasn't in it. And I would say you got to really take care of yourself and do the research and give yourself the time, and don't be scared to ask for the time to be able to do it as you should be able to do it as you venture out. And you will be able to find purpose in something else. You just got to figure out what that purpose looks like for you.
Awesome. Garrett, thank you so much for joining us, brother.
Thanks, Carson. I appreciate the time, man.
Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Spotlight Podcast. And I just wanted to take a second to ask you who you think should be interviewed on the show. Who do you think is out there that's just absolutely crushing it that the veteran population needs to hear from? That's what we want to hear from you. Send us your suggestions to spotlight@thezenveteran.com. That's SPOTLIGHT @thezenveteran.com. Thanks again for listening.